The gray two-lane highway was sliced through by the bright beam of headlights. A blue, used but well-maintained Chevy Nova smoothly merged onto the road, flanked on both sides by dense forest. Inside the car sat two people, a girl around 17 years old, and a tall, solidly built young man who appeared to be about 25. Corey focused intently through the windshield, scanning for the turn supposedly marked by a massive oak tree, just as Beatrice, Don's cousin, had described in detail. Beatrice was Don's cousin and his girlfriend's sister, now sitting beside him in the car. "Corey, sweetie." Corey remembered Beatrice's words. "You can't miss the turn that leads to the estate because it's right in your line of sight. There should also be a big sign pointing to the Fleur d'Orange estate." Bea had been so bubbly, so eager to convince them to come, especially Corey. And Corey, a modest girl from a humble background, hadn't been keen on attending a party thrown by Don's friends. But Beatrice had been so insistent, painting a vivid picture of all the pleasures awaiting them at the countryside estate. Corey had imagined it all: a pool, tennis court, and plenty of charming spots to relax and have fun. In the end, Corey gave in to temptation and agreed to come along. Now they were driving in Don's car, a med student attending on an athletic scholarship, to a party among wealthy people who were strangers to Corey. Her boyfriend was a forward for the Red Devils hockey team. Don had great potential, and his coach, Meister Collins, often praised him, promising that he'd have lucrative career opportunities down the line. Don might have looked like he was 25, but his ID clearly stated he had just turned 21. "Don, sweetheart, we've been driving for so long. Are we almost there?" Corey asked with a hint of worry. "Don't worry, babe, we're fine. I know this road like the back of my hand. I've driven here 100 times. Once you see the turn, we're practically there." Suddenly, Don hit the brakes. "What the hell?" Corey, secured by her seatbelt, jerked forward and asked, "What's wrong?" "I don't know. See for yourself. This road doesn't look right. Look, the asphalt's gone, and now it's just a single-lane dirt path. Get me the map, babe." Corey reached into the glove compartment. "Not there. Check my bag." She lifted the gym bag from the floor, placed it on her lap, and started rummaging through the neatly folded clothes. Don cracked the window open. The cool night air brought a slight refreshment to his sweat-slicked face. He reached into the pocket of his maroon gym bag. His large, powerful-looking hand quickly found a pack of Pall Mall cigarettes. The heavy metal lighter he pulled out next gleamed under the dashboard light. Blonde-haired Don Sullivan lit up, inhaling deeply and exhaling rings of smoke. He sighed with relief, thinking, "Man, that's better." He'd never experienced this before. Don usually knew the roads by heart, felt every turn. He didn't need a map. Once he traveled a route, it got imprinted in his mind like a beacon, always guiding him accurately on his next trip. Finally, Corey pulled out a large folded road map from a transparent bag. She handed it to Don. He flicked the almost smoked cigarette out the window, then took the map. "What do you think?" Corey asked. "Do you think there's any signal here? Give it a shot. Maybe you'll pick something up. If you're feeling nervous, how about taking a little walk to clear your head? You might even get through to that pain in the neck, Beatrice, huh?" "Okay, I'll get out, stretch my legs, and try to make a call. You check the map." Corey opened the door, zipped up her light green jacket, and stepped out into the night. She was a beautiful girl. Her slender, graceful figure wasn't diminished by the cheap, plain clothes she wore. On curves like hers, even a burlap sack would look good. That's what Don thought as he glanced between the map and the sight of her stepping out of the car. Don wasn't a fool. He knew the right way. His brown eyes sparkled with a sharp, inquisitive mind as he looked at the map, thinking, "Okay, gas station. Past it. Bus stop. Yeah, we saw that too." By his calculations, they should have taken a turn at least an hour ago. He furrowed his high forehead. His thick, unruly eyebrows arched in surprise. He put the map aside and thought for a moment. Once Corey came back, he'd turn the car around and head back to the gas station. There, he'd call his sister and let her know they were stuck. Don pulled out his phone from the glove compartment. Damn, the battery's dead. Strange. It was a high-end phone, supposed to last at least 12 hours, provided you weren't gaming or browsing the web like his roommate Jonathan always did. Damn idiot, he forgot to charge the battery again, and he promised. That's it. The jerk's done for as soon as I get back. Don pictured Jonathan begging for mercy, offering money just to avoid a punch to his pretty, almost girlish face. He smirked, shoved the phone back into the glove compartment without catching a signal, and then pressed the button for the radio, hoping to hear a human voice. The silence was getting on his nerves. The radio crackled. The static buzzed like a swarm of angry bees, fraying Don's already tense nerves. He couldn't take it anymore and switched off the useless, annoying radio. Corey walked along the highway. The biting wind chilled her bare arms, slipping under her green butterfly-patterned sweater, tugging and tousling her thick chestnut hair. The road seemed endless. Corey kept looking for power lines, but there were none. She wondered how she'd ended up in such a remote place. Corey stopped, glancing around. The forest loomed black and unbroken, not a single gap in the dense darkness. The moon, which had lit her way, vanished behind a thick cloud. The cold, distant stars gleamed down at her, indifferent and mocking. Corey shivered. A gust of wind carried the musty smell of stagnant water, making her wrinkle her nose in disgust. The stench twisted her stomach into knots, and she doubled over, fighting the urge to retch. A crow cawed sharply, shattering the heavy silence and making Corey jump. A flock of large black birds had settled in a blackberry thicket growing beside the highway. To Corey, it seemed like they were watching her. A dense white mist appeared out of nowhere, stretching its slippery tendrils toward the road. It seemed like the wind was urging the fog forward. A wave of anxiety bordering on panic squeezed Corey's heart. It ached, and a cold knot formed in her stomach. Something strange is going on, she thought. I need to get out of here. Corey turned and ran back toward the car. The headlights seemed dim and distant, as if the car was miles away. Her thin-soled sneakers offered no protection for her tender feet from the sharp stones and gravel that filled the rain-washed potholes. Corey was a city girl, and the forest triggered an instinctive fear buried deep in her subconscious. It stirred up an anxiety and terror at the thought of getting lost within it. The fear of being swallowed by the ancient trees, buried beneath wet, rotting leaves, and dying in silence, accompanied only by the mocking cries of birds. Dying alone in the dark, without the chance to say goodbye, left to decay in the damp, earthy ground that smelled of rot and pine. These thoughts weren't random. When Corey was 3 years old, she had gotten lost in the woods. 3 days of her childhood were wiped from her memory, but the memories lived somewhere deep inside her, buried beneath the shock and terror she had felt. The fear had lingered, and in moments like this, it always resurfaced. leaving a bitter taste in her mouth and making her palms sweat. Finally, Corey reached the car. She flung the door open and leapt inside like a frightened wild animal. Then she screamed, loud and sudden, but the sound that escaped her mouth was more like a thin, mouse-like squeak. "Dawn, close all the windows and doors, quick." "What's wrong, babe? Did you see a wolf?" "Just do as I say." All right, Dawn replied, smiling as he closed the door tightly, then locked the doors to reassure Corey. Corey rolled up the window. "Okay, tell me what happened. Did you manage to make a call?" "No signal. And further down the road, there's just a thick tangle of fallen trees." "What scared you so much? You're as pale as a sheet. Did you see a ghost or something?" In the warmth and light of the car, the fears that had gripped Corey began to fade, and she found them almost silly. She shook her head, regaining her composure, and whispered softly, "It's the forest, the road, and the creepy silence. Damn birds. They were watching me. I'm sure of it. I swear. Do you believe me?" Her golden eyes looked up at Dawn's dark brown ones, filled with genuine concern, searching for reassurance. "Come here, babe. Trust me. It's just an echo of that childhood nightmare coming back to you. It happens, and it's perfectly normal." Dawn wrapped his arms around Corey, draping his jacket over her. She looked small and fragile in his embrace, like a child. Though she stood at about 5'7" compared to Dawn's 6 feet and his 200 pounds of solid muscle, she seemed so tiny, delicate, and much younger than her 19 years, more like 17. Corey was studying to become a veterinarian. She had a deep love for animals, and since she was a child, she'd bring home every stray cat and puppy she found. Animals loved her back. Even the meanest dog would calmly eat from her small hands, lick her cheeks, and wag its tail like a loyal friend. Corey always knew that helping animals was her calling. She believed it was her talent, a gift from above. Dawn, on the other hand, found her innocent ideas endearing. He didn't believe in God or the devil, only in what he could see and touch with his own hands. Corey warmed up in Dawn's arms, then pulled away slightly. "What do we do now?" she asked him. "We'll turn around and head back to the gas station." "Not a bad idea. Let's grab a bite while we're there, too. I always get hungry when I'm scared." Dawn smiled, dimples forming on his cheeks, softening his tough guy image. "Yeah, babe," he replied to Corey. "Honestly, I'm starving too." As he spoke, he glanced suggestively at her full lips. Corey laughed, giving him a gentle tap on the shoulder. "How can you think about that in a situation like this? I'm shocked. Just give me a kiss and I'll take us right back." "How could I refuse?" Corey leaned in, pressing her lips softly to his. Dawn's lips parted, deepening the kiss, their long suppressed desire flaring to life. Corey was the first to pull away, asking, "I hope that's enough for you." "It's a good start." Corey raised a thin eyebrow in surprise, and Dawn, seeing her reaction, added, All right. Your little kiss is enough to get me moving and out of here." The car started up and turned back toward the gas station. But soon, a cold wind brought a heavy storm. Dawn had to hit the brakes. The rain poured down from the dark sky, flooding the windshield, and even with the wipers going full speed, visibility was nearly zero. Dawn looked at Corey apologetically and said, "Sorry, babe. Looks like we're stuck here for the night. If we keep driving, it's not safe." I could easily slide into a ditch in this weather, and that would make things even worse. You understand? Damn it, Don. This is all your fault. Why did you convince me you knew the way so well? Enough, Corey. Complaining won't help. A preacher's daughter shouldn't talk like that. His words had the effect of a cold splash of water on Corey. She gathered herself and reached into the glove compartment, pulling out a small pack of salted chips. How do we split this? She asked Don. Fairly. Half for you, half for me. Don't worry, Corey. I've also got some mints, and there's a bottle of mineral water in the basket on the back seat. It's better than nothing. They crunched on the chips, washing them down with the mineral water. Then they moved on to the mints. Don turned the radio back on. Damn, still no signal. Don't curse, Don. You're the one who said swearing doesn't help. Not fair. You curse like a sailor sometimes. And besides, damn isn't really cursing, it's just how I feel about this mess, all right? Blah, blah, blah. Corey mimicked him. Let's just sleep. Morning will come faster that way. The heavy rain pounded on the roof, running down the windows in thin, clear streams. Corey curled up in the back seat like a cat, tucking one of her small hands under her head as a makeshift pillow. Gradually, her eyelids grew heavy, and she drifted off to sleep. Don took off his jacket, left in just a thin t-shirt. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes from the glove compartment. Just 3 left. That's not much, he thought, but it'll get me through the night. The sound of the rain irritated him. Rain always put Don in a bad mood. He hated water ever since his older brother Zarak had thrown him into a pool when he was just 8 years old. Don had barely survived that day, and Zarak had gotten his own scare too, pulling a waterlogged, half-drowned Don out of the cold pool. Don never learned to swim after that. Years had passed, but the bitterness and anger toward his brother lingered in the depths of his soul. Lost in his troubled thoughts, Don didn't notice when the rain finally stopped. He smoked the last of his cigarettes down to the filter. Then he finished the last of the water, draining the few remaining drops from the bottle, and eventually slipped into a deep, thick sleep, like molasses. His eyelids shut of their own accord, though he was usually a night owl who never went to bed before 2 in the morning. The hands of his wristwatch pointed straight to midnight. Thick, milk-like fog rolled over the ground like a velvet sheet. Its dense white tendrils spread, creeping further and further. The wet highway gradually disappeared into the mist. The wind died down. A cold cloud of fog moved slowly, as if guided by strange laws of nature or pulled by an unseen force, settling over the rain-soaked earth. The moon emerged from behind the clouds, casting beams of light that reflected off the wet leaves and filtered through the fog, falling onto Don's closed eyelids. Don was having a strange dream. A tall, beautiful woman in a bright, blood-red dress called to him, using his name. "Can you hear me, Donald? Let me in. Open the door. I'm so cold and so lonely. Warm me, Donald. Hold me close and warm me." Her voice, soft and melodic, sounded like the gentle strumming of a lute, lulling Don's consciousness with a ringing bell-like tone. There was a longing and deep desire in her voice, so sweet and intoxicating that resisting it was impossible. The stranger's eyes glowed with a feline green. Her gaze pierced straight into Don's soul. He couldn't look away, his consciousness sinking lower and lower until it reached the bottom. Her eyes promised him bliss, earthly passion, and the pleasures of her skilled, sumptuous body. Her pale skin, like whipped cream, seemed to glow with a soft, alluring light. Staring into her eyes, Don could almost taste her lips, so enticingly sweet and hot. He had never felt such a wild, untamed desire for any woman. Surrendering to her charms, his mind became light and soft, like spun sugar, his control slipping away. Driven by an impulse, he whispered, come in quickly, I'll warm you, stranger." A cold, damp wind carried her reply, laced with hidden poison. "As you wish, my sweet. I'm coming." Out of the mist, a figure appeared. The woman seemed to float above the ground. Her green eyes blazed with anticipation. Suddenly she shot upward, transforming into a black bird. In her new form, she flew toward the car and in a moment landed on the hood. Then she vanished, dissolving into a cloud of white smoke. The car door swung open silently. A white mist began to flow into the opening. Soon, the fog dispersed, and a large white cat appeared on the passenger seat. Its red eyes glowed with a devilish fire, flickering with a golden shimmer. Don and Corey slept, trapped in an enchanted sleep. Their bodies twitched, lips moving in soundless whispers. Their minds and souls struggled, but they lacked the strength to fight back. The cat softly leapt onto Don's lap. He was still asleep. His warm body had a faint scent of mint. The red-eyed cat sniffed the air. It liked the smell of the young man's skin, but what it craved most was the rich, strong, healthy scent of the blood coursing through his veins. Don's head lolled back against the seat, a thin strand of drool slipping from his slightly open mouth, threatening to drip onto his t-shirt. Beneath his closed eyelids, his eyes flickered, darting back and forth. His hands twitched periodically. His fingers clenched and unclenched into fists. "He's not bad," thought Samantha. In her cat form, her senses were sharper, more vivid, attuned to the world around her. Samantha considered playing with the boy, but that thought was fleeting, swept away by the deep hunger burning inside her like cold, consuming fire. She couldn't fight the hunger any longer, and even if she tried, her instincts would have won out. With a swift leap, Samantha lunged at the man's muscular neck, licking his warm, slightly salty skin with her rough tongue. Then she opened her jaws wide, baring her fangs, and sank them deep into his neck, tearing into his firm flesh. She drank greedily, lapping up the hot, salty blood, quenching the hunger, warming the cold emptiness within, drawing strength from it. Don's body convulsed. Blood sprayed in a thick stream, splattering the car's interior with crimson. On the glass, abstract streaks spread like the work of a mad artist with a red paintbrush. The white fur of the cat Samantha became stained with the rich red of blood, and she continued drinking until her belly swelled. She drank until the pulse weakened, until the haunting, captivating melody of the young heart's beating faded into silence. Then she tore at the neck muscles, twisting from side to side until the head, with lips slack and face frozen in agony, dropped to the floor, rolling under the seat like a rotten watermelon. The blood gave Samantha strength. A triumphant, savage howl burst from her throat, echoing through the pre-dawn air with her victory cry. The sound startled every living thing in the vicinity. After a few seconds, a reply came, sharp, shrill caws from the crows, answering her call. The cat nudged the door open with her paw, then licked the blood off her whiskers, savoring the taste. And with a smooth, graceful leap, she disappeared into the night. Corey drifted in the void, wrapped in the webs of sleep. In her dream, she ran forward without looking back. Escape, survive, was the only thought that pounded in her mind. Swampy, filthy, sticky mud clung to her legs. The thick black earth stank of decay and rot. Soft, slippery brown moss covered the ground. Corey kept running. She couldn't bear to look back. She knew that if she did, she would die. Her heart pounded. A lump of fear lodged in her throat. Cold wrapped around her bare shoulders like a freezing blanket. She screamed, turning back despite the terror of the unknown. She screamed, staring into the darkness swirling behind her like black smoke. It thickened, taking shape into something terrifying and vaguely familiar. Fear and dread pierced through her dream, forcing her awake. Her breath came in short gasps, her heart thudding in her throat. The silence, the deathly silence around her, made Corey think she was still dreaming. Why is it so cold? She thought. Why? Corey sat up and saw that the car door was open. A gusty, bone-chilling wind blew through the gap. She stood, intending to find Don. She desperately wanted to hug him, to hear his familiar, gentle voice, to press against his chest and feel safe again. Then she noticed the bright red stains, dried in streaks, smeared across the window like the careless strokes of an abstract artist. Suddenly, she saw the entire scene clearly. She turned pale. Her eyes refused to believe it, but her mind stubbornly pieced together the image, adding detail upon detail. Corey let out a scream, at first quiet, then so loud that her throat instantly went hoarse, turning her cries into a rasping moan that escaped involuntarily from her chest. Without thinking, driven by an overwhelming impulse, she stumbled out of the car and started running. Her legs carried her down the road forward and forward. She ran as if in a dream, yet the damn road seemed endless. Her scream faded, and now sobs choked her, transforming into angry, frightened tears. She cried, her large, salty tears, filled with the bitterness of loss, streaming down her wet cheeks. She stopped and sank to the grass at the edge of the forest. Her shoulders sagged and she sobbed harshly, burying her face in her hands, as if trying to hide from the horrific image she'd seen. The ghastly vision of Don's severed head lying on the floor of the car like a discarded toy haunted her. His mouth, frozen in a silent scream, and his closed eyes, those images were etched deeply into her mind. Corey feared that Don's eyes might suddenly open, reflecting a mute plea, a sight she couldn't bear. It felt like it might break her or kill her. She tried to collect her thoughts. A cold, damp fog enveloped her, swirling over the wet ground. Corey glanced around, and her heart fluttered like a trapped bird in her throat. Fear chased away all coherent thoughts, amplifying the sense of hidden danger in her mind. The fog's getting thicker, or am I imagining it? That can't be real, can it? But Corey still trusted her own eyes. She looked around again. Standing at the forest's edge, where the trees creaked and whispered without a hint of wind, she saw the thick fog everywhere she looked. It blocked her view like a solid wall, obscuring all shapes and objects for many yards ahead. Corey felt a chilling terror. Her palms grew sweaty, and a cold, tight knot lodged in her throat. Her survival instincts kicked in, flooding her body with adrenaline, screaming at her, "Run!" Cold sweat soaked through her t-shirt as she sprinted toward the dark, unwelcoming forest. Her yellow sneakers slipped in the thick, mud-like ground. Tree branches whipped against her face, and cold raindrops stung her eyes. She shivered, completely drenched by the rain falling from the tree canopy. Corey kept running. Then she glanced back and saw the fog creeping relentlessly after her. She stopped, noticing a clearing where the ground was blackened and bare. Corey took a step forward onto the scorched earth. Then she turned back again. The fog was gone, as if it had never been there. Taking a few more steps, she spotted an old, crooked house near the edge of the woods, like a long-abandoned woodsman's cabin. The roof had holes that gaped like empty eye sockets, and ivy had wrapped the wooden walls in a thick green carpet. The remains of a stone well were covered in a lush layer of emerald moss. On the roof sat black birds. The largest crow let out a piercing caw. In the murky, dusty window a light flickered, blue and glimmering like otherworldly candlelight. The glow captivated Corey, holding her gaze. Her legs felt heavy like lead, and she stood frozen, unable to move. She felt like she had turned to stone. The heavy, half-rotted door creaked open, as if it were an old woman stricken with rheumatism. A shimmering light spilled into the doorway. It grew until she could make out the faint, translucent outline of a tall, gaunt old man. He wore an old tailcoat, breeches, and tall boots. At his hip, she could clearly see the shape of a long sword or saber. The outline grew more defined, colors becoming clear. The old man's hair, white as snow, flowed around his head in a shaggy mane. He flickered between a pale, ghostly figure and something almost alive. Suddenly, the old man rose into the air, flying toward Corey. In terror, she shut her eyes, bracing herself for inevitable death. A whisper, heavy and filled with longing and endless waiting, cut through the night like a moan. The ghostly wind touched Corey's face, chilling her skin, making the hairs on her body stand on end with a tingling sensation. The wind and the whisper pierced her heart, which responded with a deep, aching pain. Suddenly, Corey's body obeyed her will again. She heard the fading, retreating words, filled with a clear and urgent meaning. Run. The crows, as if awakened, took off in unison from the roof. They cawed wildly, swirling and swooping down, trying to stab at the spectral figure with their sharp beaks. The old man flickered, turning translucent, then vanished. Driven by instinct, Corey ran. And behind her the fog unfurled, whispering with a spectral, disembodied voice, "You can't escape. You are mine." She fled back into the forest. In the darkness, everything blurred together, and the path shifted, becoming unfamiliar. Corey stumbled upon an open grave she recognized by its tombstone. She painfully struck the stone, letting out a small whimper, but she kept running. Her lungs burned with fire, and she regretted not working out more. And there were so many graves. It turned out she had been running in circles. The path led her back to the clearing and the house. Desperation filled her as she screamed, feeling the mocking, thunderous laughter of the crows ringing behind her. Corey turned to the left, darting toward where she believed the road was. Almost reaching the familiar path, she tripped over an exposed tree root and tumbled down a slope into a dark, rain-washed pit. Leaves softened her fall, but she scraped her hands and tore her jeans on the rocks and sharp branches piled up by the wind. A stabbing pain shot through her knee. Gritting her teeth, she tried to stay hidden, hoping that whatever was following her wouldn't find her there. A white cat prowled cautiously around the pit. Its soft paws sent clumps of dirt and leaves tumbling into the hollow. The cat purred, arching its body, and then it transformed into a beautiful woman with a pale face and bright, blood-red lips. Samantha leaned over the pit. Her arm stretched unnaturally, and claws grew from her slender fingers. Corey trembled with terror, a cold shiver shaking her body, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. "I'm losing my mind," she thought, her fear shifting into hysterical laughter. A memory flashed through her mind. Her father, Michael. a strong man in his 40s with a thick mane of black hair streaked with gray at the temples, reading her a bedtime story about Snow White. She was a small 5-year-old asking him, "Daddy, will the evil witch find me?" "No, sweetheart," her father would reply. "If you pray to God, He will send an angel from heaven to protect you and save you. Remember, Corey, a prayer backed by faith is very powerful." And in the delirium of her growing madness, Corey began to silently recite a prayer. Words spilled from her lips, and tears of terror streamed down her cheeks, easing the tension and fear that gripped her. With each word she spoke, a small sense of confidence began to bloom in her heart. Corey whispered the final words of her prayer. Samantha's clawed hand reached out, almost brushing against Corey's tangled hair as she lay at the bottom of the pit. In her heart, the predator sang a triumphant song. Samantha could almost taste the prize she had longed for. The promise of pure, sweet blood was intoxicating. But then, a sudden gust of wind swept away the dark night clouds. The gray dawn brought a faint pre-dawn glow. It was just enough. The clawed hand snapped back and Samantha hissed in fury. She transformed back into a cat. The weak, diffuse light of the sun was unbearable, burning her skin like sulfuric acid and draining her strength. The cat bounded toward the old house, seeking refuge in the lingering shadows. The fog melted away, dissolving in the gentle pink light of morning. Samantha's hatred and fury over the loss of her prey boiled inside her, clouding her mind with rage. "This isn't over," she promised herself, seething with anger. "This isn't the last time, human, we will meet again." And with that, Samantha disappeared with the retreating night. Everything changed. The night's enchantment lost its power. The road turned back to normal. The muddy ruts and rain-filled potholes transformed into smooth asphalt. Birds sang as they awoke. The gentle rays of the rising sun gilded the cold dew, sparkling on the grass and leaves. The forest came back to life. Corey lay unconscious on a bed of wet leaves, at the bottom of a 6-foot-deep pit. A piece of her knitted sweater and one of her yellow sneakers, now smeared with mud, lay scattered in the woods, marking her location. County Sheriff Patrick Frost trudged heavily along the muddy, rain-soaked forest path. His Stetson clung to his sweaty forehead, so he took it off. Huffing and muttering under his breath, he continued to move his thick legs with effort and determination. A few steps ahead of him, holding a small flashlight, was his deputy, young officer Harry Barton. "Harry, hold up, kid." "Sheriff, I think I see something up ahead. Looks like a dirty sneaker, or maybe a tennis shoe," Harry replied, not quite catching the sheriff's words. "Yeah, the missing girl, Corey March. Let's think back. Beatrice and her bunch swore she wouldn't take off those yellow sneakers and would probably show up to the party in them." "Yep, Sheriff. This is definitely a yellow sneaker." "Well, aren't you a sharp-eyed one, Deputy? Do you think she made it to that cursed clearing?" "I don't know," Harry replied, shrugging his shoulders. Just the mention of that ominous place always sent a shiver through the young officer. Every time he remembered how many people had disappeared here without a trace, his heart skipped a beat, and his hands trembled like aspen leaves in the wind. Harry bent down to pick up the mud-stained yellow sneaker. Somewhere in the distance, the wind carried a sound like a faint moan. Harry turned, scanning for the source. He absently swung his flashlight back and forth. The sheriff, puffing heavily, caught up to him. "You heard that too, didn't you, kid?" the sheriff asked. "Yeah," the deputy nodded. Exchanging a look, they moved toward the bushes where a pit lay hidden. The sheriff crouched down, pressing his belly to the ground, and crawled along the pit's edge, shining his flashlight into its depths. The dark pit smelled of damp leaves and moisture. Corey heard voices, distant, distinctly male voices. She struggled to open her lips, which felt stuck together like a tight knot. Her dry, cracked lips parted, causing her pain as the skin split and bled. The voices grew nearer, closer and closer. A faint but blindingly bright beam of light fell across her face. Corey tried to scream, but what came out was just a weak rasp. "Help me, please help me." The effort drained her, and she slipped back into unconsciousness. "What are you standing there for?" the sheriff shouted as he got to his feet. His uniform shirt and pants were smeared with damp earth. Water soaked through his trousers, chilling his thick belly, running down his legs, and seeping into his wool socks. "Harry, help the girl out of there while I call for backup." A white ambulance van sped away, carrying a now conscious Corey March to the hospital. To the two questions asked by the sheriff, Corey had shaken her head. The doctors diagnosed her with severe concussion, shock, and possibly temporary amnesia. The ambulance quickly disappeared into the distance. The sheriff and his young deputy waited for the crime scene investigators to arrive. A pair of local cops had stumbled upon the Blue Nova parked by the roadside. The young deputy, bent over for the third time, was vomiting into the bushes. The sheriff, his face pale and tinged with green, clutched at his chest, gulping in the fresh forest air. It had been a long time since anything like this had happened in their town. The sheriff suspected that some lunatic had escaped from a facility and somehow wandered into their little town. Now it would begin. Panic, media frenzy, and all the local reporters flocking to the scene. And he had no leads, no solid theories, no clues. The missing girl they'd found was clearly not in her right mind. "That's it," Patrick thought. "You're knee-deep in trouble. And guess who's stuck cleaning it up? You. Goodbye to a peaceful job, and I was just looking forward to retirement." The sheriff stood there, waiting for the forensics team, and possibly some unwanted but inevitable federal agents. He glanced up at the clear blue sky, then his body began to shake. A nervous, barking laugh mixed with hiccups burst from his throat, and he doubled over, unable to control it. "What a joke," he thought. "Dream come true, right? Now I'll definitely make the front page of tomorrow's paper. But not as a hero, no. More like a pathetic, washed-up, paper-pushing, pension-bound cop." A black, tinted Jaguar roared down the single-lane highway like a predator, cutting through the air. The heavy metal blasting from the car's stereo system trailed in its wake. Inside, the built-in sound system thundered at full volume. A dark-skinned young man with thick, wavy hair tied in a bun at the back of his head gripped the steering wheel, his husky, smoky voice somehow managing to keep up with the singer. The driver was in a hurry. He was casually dressed in stylish, tight blue jeans and a black t-shirt that read, "Kiss my ass." Beside him, on the leather-covered passenger seat, sat an open black gym bag. From its depths peeked a crocodile leather wallet and a sleek silver cell phone, along with a jumble of other small items. On the back seat lay an open pack of Lucky Strikes, a heavy black lighter, and a few lacy women's panties, leftovers from a wild time with a pair of girls, to be precise, the Douglas twins, Betty and Vinayamina. Of course, if those two were actually 21, the driver would eat his own tie, the one he'd brought along with the suit for his younger brother's funeral. It was that somber event that had him driving to his parents' place, heading directly from Los Angeles after listening to his mother's tearful voicemail on his answering machine. Though he and Don had butted heads, he still loved his bear-like little brother. The senseless death of his brother, This unsolved dark mystery gnawed at Zarak's mind, filling him with a deep and genuine grief. What a pointless death. Who had the nerve to kill my brother like that? No signs of a struggle. So much blood. And just how strong would someone have to be to tear out a throat? And that girl, Corey. How long had it been since he'd seen her? What, 10 years or so? Don's girlfriend. Could she have killed him and then pretended to be out of her mind? No, even if she was built like a Terminator, she couldn't take down my brother on her own. These thoughts brought a bitter smile to Zarak's lips. The image of such an unlikely scenario flitted through his mind. But no. That was far from reality, whatever the truth might be. Zarak knew that Don liked younger girls. Strong, manly women weren't his type. Zarak had been driving for over an hour, using a map to find the remote ranch. He knew that relying on the local cops wouldn't get him far, and that if he wanted results, he'd have to handle things himself. "I'll avenge you, little brother," Zarak vowed silently, his teeth clenched with anger and rage. He tightened his fist and raised it, shaking it at the unknown enemy. Then he pressed down on the gas, speeding up. The speedometer climbed to 150 miles per hour before he slammed on the brakes, spotting an old, rusted road sign swinging in the wind like a weather vane. The sign read that March's farm was 2 miles south along the highway. Zarak drove on, more cautiously this time, then turned onto a small wooden bridge that crossed a narrow, clear stream. He drove over the bridge, which creaked ominously under the weight of the car, making Zarak wary of a possible collapse into the shallow but distant river below. The forest thinned out, revealing a vast green field surrounding the road on both sides. The road's condition worsened, turning into a rutted track filled with potholes and rocks. The Jaguar had to slow down, bumping along the uneven grass-covered path. After the 2 miles promised by the sign, Zarak switched off the music before the end of his favorite ear-splitting song, then put on a pair of dark sunglasses and pulled a baseball cap low over his eyes. Ahead, on a hill, stood a lone 2-story stone house. The building was old. The once bright blue paint had faded and now hung in blistered, swollen patches, ready to peel off at any moment. The red tiles of the roof gleamed proudly in the sun. The driveway was overgrown with daisies and weeds, adding a touch of charm and freshness, and suggesting that the house was home to a woman. Young apple trees planted in neat rows rustled their large green leaves near the window. They shaded a white wooden gazebo that looked recently built. Zarak pulled up in front of the house, stopping beside a well-tended lawn bordered by a white picket fence. Stepping out of the car, he cast a careful glance at the house and listened. He heard no sound to suggest that anyone was inside. Just the cheerful chirping of small gray birds hidden among the shadows of the apple leaves. For a moment, Zarak thought the house was empty, and that struck him as strange. After all, it was 8 in the morning on a Sunday, and from what he knew, regular people would just be waking up. He looked up at the tall windows. No, he wasn't mistaken. A light green curtain moved slightly. It told him that someone was watching him, perhaps for a while now. With quick steps, Zarak walked up to the white front door. He smirked at the horseshoe hanging over the threshold, a charm that many believed would bring luck into the home. Zarak pressed the shiny black doorbell. Inside the house, a bell rang out, followed by the creaking of floorboards and the sound of footsteps approaching. Soon the door opened and a head peeked out, belonging to a girl with damp, violet-scented hair tied back in a careless ponytail. Without asking who it was, Corey March confidently stepped out, eyeing the visitor. She looked up to study him carefully, A tall, athletic build, a handsome, rugged face, and eyes hidden behind dark sunglasses. The guy removed his shades, revealing eyes that gleamed with a cold, mocking light. She didn't recognize him immediately. 10 years had passed. He had changed, grown up, and now resembled a man who had seen it all. But it was him, Don's brother, Zarak. Unpleasant memories rose to the surface, and Corey had an overwhelming urge to slam the door right in his face, straight into that long, albeit handsome nose. As if sensing her intentions, Zarak gripped the door frame tightly and planted a sneaker-clad foot on the threshold, anticipating any attempt by Corey to shut the door. Then, he removed his cap and hooked his sunglasses into the collar of his t-shirt. He grinned, his smile taunting and disdainful, with a frozen Arctic chill behind his eyes. "You've grown up, turned into a real beauty. Now I see what my brother saw in you. Honestly, I'm surprised. A scrawny little colt has become a stunning mare." "Get out!" Corey snapped angrily. Her golden eyes, flecked with brown, flashed with fury. "Is this how you greet old friends? What happened to your hospitality? You're a preacher's daughter after all." "Listen," Corey responded, her voice tired and full of contempt. She could see that fighting Zarak would be pointless. "Too bad I'm home alone," she thought. "Just get to the point. Why are you here? Say what you came to say, then go back where you came from. Answer a few questions and I'll leave you alone." Before she could say another word, Zarak reached out, catching a stray curl that had fallen over her forehead, and gently tucked it behind her ear. Corey's eyes flashed, but she swallowed down the anger rising in her throat. "Has anyone ever told you that you're beautiful when you're mad?" Recalling Zarak's usual behavior and unpredictable tendencies, Corey forced a smile and replied, "Come on in. I'll make you some coffee, and then you'll go, deal?" "Okay, sweetheart. I do love a good cup of coffee." Zarak stepped inside. In the center of the living room, a white couch with beige lace pillows seemed to invite him to sit. A glass coffee table stood in front of it, topped with a turquoise ceramic vase filled with fresh daisies, probably picked not long ago. Above the fireplace hung a massive, cream-colored shelf designed to look antique, with molding along the edges depicting waves and flowers. On the shelf were many photographs, too many in Zarak's opinion. Most of them featured his younger brother, always smiling so young. Zarak hadn't realized that Donald could be so tender as Corey had captured in those images. After looking at the photos for a while, Zarak sat down in a small white armchair, throwing his long legs up onto the coffee table. He watched as Corey frowned at his lack of manners, then smoothly headed toward the kitchen. Zarak couldn't help but admire her graceful, almost cat-like stride. "She is lovely," he thought. "So delicate yet stubborn. A spark encased in ice." He immediately caught himself for entertaining such foolish thoughts. Corey isn't a friend. She's more like an enemy. She knows what happened to Don, and maybe she's even responsible for it. And for reasons I don't understand, she might be covering for someone. Maybe that's why she's pretending to have amnesia. "Remember, Zarak," a voice whispered inside him. "All women are trouble. You can't trust them." Lost in thought, he shivered slightly and shrugged his shoulders when Corey silently re-entered the room, walking on the floor in her striped socks. She set a glass tray with a full coffee pot and 2 cups on the table. The smell of freshly brewed coffee immediately lifted Zarak's spirits. It had been a while since he'd had brewed coffee. He'd been too busy, making do with instant blends or the tasteless stuff from vending machines. Corey poured the coffee into the cups, gesturing toward the sugar and creamer. She was the first to take a cup of the steaming black-as-night liquid, adding 2 cubes of yellow cane sugar and slowly stirring the drink with a silver teaspoon. As she took slow sips of the coffee, Zarak could see by her contented expression that the coffee was, indeed, good. When Zarak poured himself a cup, adding a generous amount of cream, Corey studied his face. He's still got that sweet tooth, she thought, piling on the sugar just like he did back when we were kids. The thought made her smile, but it also filled her with a sense of dread. She feared developing diabetes, something she was genetically predisposed to. Zarak, it seemed, wasn't too concerned about living a healthy lifestyle, even though he carried himself like a confident, tough guy. Looks can be deceiving. Corey had learned that lesson through life, and she believed she could read a person's true nature by looking into their eyes. She had a talent for sensing hidden deceit and lies, a skill that guided her in choosing her career path. Eyes are the windows to the soul, her mother used to tell her. If someone's eyes lied, it meant something precious inside them had broken, something that could never be fixed. Corey's mother had passed away from leukemia 3 years ago. The girl still carried that grief within her, a sorrow that had never quite healed. Sometimes, she almost forgot that her mother was gone, especially in the evenings while she prepared dinner. It felt like any moment, the wooden door would creak open, and her mother would walk in. Corey's mother had been a veterinarian, treating cows and horses. Her talent, or perhaps her gift, seemed to have been passed down to Corey. Zarak took a sip of coffee, then another. His face lit up, the worry and tension fading away. He murmured appreciatively, "Delicious. Thanks." "You're welcome," Corey replied. Silence stretched between them. Zarak poured himself another cup of coffee, adding the same amount of milk and sugar as before, then downed half of the small cup in one gulp. "All right, let's get down to business, Miss March. I know that you were with Don when he died. You know what happened that night. Tell me everything. I'm not leaving without the truth." "Zarak, I don't remember. I have amnesia." Interesting word. It explains everything, doesn't it? But I think you're just pretending. Hiding the truth, right, Corey? "What did you say?" Corey asked, anger flaring in her voice. "How dare you accuse me? I loved Don." She sprang from the couch, glaring at Zarak. He remained seated, looking up at her with a calm yet piercing gaze, his expression as cold as ice. "Get out! Get out of my house right now! You jerk, get out!" Corey shouted, her voice trembling with rage. "Or what?" Zarak replied calmly. "You're going to throw me out? You don't have the guts for that, sweetheart." Zarak stood slowly, rising from the chair. His 6'3" frame loomed over her 5'7" stature, and Corey instinctively shrank back. "Are you scared? Fear can be a good thing. Now tell me what you know, or else—" "Why don't you believe me?" she asked, frightened but still resolute. "Why?" "I've got a gut feeling that something's not right here, so be a good girl and start talking," Zarak said, his voice sharp with suspicion. I have nothing to hide. I don't remember anything. The doctors say my memory will come back with time." "When?" Zarak interrupted, leaning closer. "In a year, 2 years, 10? I don't have time to wait. I need the truth now. Only then will I leave you alone. Do you understand?" "But what can I do? My memory. It just isn't coming back, no matter what. And those places, the forest, they make me tremble. I don't even know what I'm afraid of. It's like I encountered something strange and sinister, and it terrifies me. It sounds stupid, doesn't it? Corey shrugged, looking defeated. You know, sweetheart, let's make a deal. Let's work together, all right? I have a few ideas. I think I might know a way to help you remember everything. Zarak paused, staring at the fireplace, then turned back to the girl, whose face was clouded with confusion and distress. He asked, "Where's your phone? I need to make a call." "In the kitchen. I'll show you." "No need. I remember where things are. I used to come here often, remember? 10 years ago." "Suit yourself," Corey replied simply. She untied her hair from the ponytail and absent-mindedly ran her fingers through the thick, damp strands. Zarak walked into the kitchen, reflecting on how little had changed about the house. The walls had a new color, and the furniture had been upgraded to something more expensive, but the place was the same, still standing on the spot where Corey's grandfather, Heinrich, had built it. A solid, dependable home. The kitchen was large and cozy. Zarak remembered the smell of chocolate chip cookies, tinged with vanilla and a hint of cinnamon, that Corey's mother, Juliet, used to bake. She had been so kind, her gentle smile lighting up her soft, oval face, making her seem like an angel to the young Zarak Sullivan. He picked up the phone from the large walnut-colored table and dialed a number he knew by heart. After 2 long rings, the person on the other end picked up, a sleepy voice answering irritably, "Yeah." "And a good morning to you, Bill." "Oh, it's you, Zarak." The voice softened a bit. "I'm always willing to listen to you, no matter the time." "Is that a hint?" Zarak asked with a smirk. "You know what I mean. Real, time-tested friendship." "Who'd have doubted that? I was just asking." Zarak's tone shifted as he continued. "Listen, Bill, do you remember our conversation? I asked for your help, and now I'm calling you. The day has come." "You want to come over?" "Yeah, if that's all right with you." "I'll be waiting." "I'll try to get there in 2 hours." "See you then." Zarak hung up the phone. He glanced at Corey, who had just walked into the kitchen, then said, "Get ready. You're coming with me." "But where?" Corey asked, bewildered. "I can't go. My father will be here soon. What will I tell him?" "Listen to me, sweetheart. If you want me to believe you, and if you really did love my brother like you claim, then I think you'd be interested in finding out the truth yourself, wouldn't you?" "But how?" "Questions later. I'll be waiting for you in the car." Zarak checked his waterproof watch and added, "You have exactly 10 minutes. No more." Then, without looking back, he headed for the back door, opened it, and stepped out onto the yard. Arrogant. So arrogant. Does he think I'm just going to run after him? She thought. Of course you will, an insidious inner voice whispered back. You'll chase after him like the wind, won't you? After all, you want to remember everything and get justice for the death of your beloved, don't you, Miss March? Corey scribbled a quick note for her father on a sheet torn from her gray rose-patterned notebook, not bothering with details. Then she changed quickly, slipping into a pink hoodie and gray track pants with a stripe down the side. She laced up her sneakers tightly, ready to go. Corey's well-worn backpack lay in the closet. She grabbed it and quickly stuffed it with essentials: underwear, money, her phone, a hairbrush, and other small necessities and hygiene items. Tossing in her keys, she sprinted down the stairs, racing through the living room, and slammed the front door behind her. Zarak was already revving the engine. The tinted window rolled down, revealing his handsome face. He was smiling like a lazy, satisfied cat that had just caught its prey. In a rich, smooth baritone, he pointed out, "You've got exactly 1 minute left." Corey had to resist the urge to slap that smug expression off his face and tell him where he could go. Instead, she clenched her fist, took a deep breath, and opened the car door, dropping into the soft, caramel-colored seat. She knew she needed to be cautious around Zarak, maintaining the inner calm that always seemed to slip from her grasp when he was near. The more she lost her temper, the more things would play into his hands. It had always been challenging with him. From a young age, they'd bickered constantly, like cats and dogs. Her fiery temper only made things worse. Why did he always get under my skin like this? She wondered. In his presence, Corey boiled over like a pot on the edge of spilling. Her mind clouded with anger. She longed to shake him, to put that arrogant, self-absorbed jerk in his place, to teach him a lesson. But unfortunately, she never managed to do that, not even a little. Every attempt to change things with Zarak had always backfired. Bruises, burning cheeks, infuriating teasing, scoldings from her parents, mocking glances. All were just small pieces of the big pile of awful moments she had endured growing up. But she had endured. Corey had gotten through it, and now she was a different Corey March. A confident, beautiful woman who knew how to keep her emotions in check. Or did she? Corey settled into the comfortable leather seat, then unzipped her backpack and began searching for her bone comb. Finding it, she started to brush through her thick chestnut hair, occasionally sneaking glances at Zarak. He was tense, his anger practically radiating from him, swirling through the car's interior like an invisible but tangible electric field. Corey quickly turned her gaze away from his chiseled profile and focused on the window, admiring the bright, sunny day and the lush green summer landscape. Zarak, too, occasionally stole glances at Corey when she wasn't looking. He found a strange satisfaction in observing her delicate face, her refined features, and those full lips. His keen eyes caught her hesitant, guarded attempts to watch him, but he made no sign of noticing. Instead, he kept thinking through his plans, weighing his next moves, and focusing on the road ahead, all while staying aware of the tension simmering between them.